Update, by the way, on the fantasy football thing and from one of the intros yesterday. I ended up winning by 0.2 of a point, so we out here. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the NBA draft. And I've mentioned this in a handful of videos. I've not been as invested or, quite honestly, as knowledgeable about this draft class as I have been for draft classes in the past, just because there's been so many other things to pay attention to in the NBA. But recently, I've really been immersing myself in the draft and trying to figure out how I think all this is going to go, not only with the prospects themselves, but with what is a very, very unique draft season. And the conclusion that I've come to as I've looked into all of these things, and we're going to get into more draft content as the days go by, but the conclusion that I've come to is this is going to be one of the strangest drafts that we've had in a very, very long time in the NBA. And that's for a variety of reasons that we're going to get into in this video, some obvious, some not, but really that's my whole point of the video, is like, this stuff is going to be weird. That said, really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day, and a lot of the time from moving forward, it's going to be 2 times a day. So if you enjoy NBA content, then this is a great place to be. And you can also like the video as well. It helps the video out a ton. It helps me out a ton. Helps me get out to more people on YouTube. It is very, very helpful if you would like the video as well. I have 2 things to shout out really quickly before the video gets started. One, twitch.tv/spolo_TD. I have guaranteed streams 5 times a week. It's been a great thing to continue to grow day after day. It's definitely has a good amount of momentum behind it. It's definitely growing each day. So if you guys want to come hang out, talk about basketball, talk about whatever, is a great place to be. And you can also hang out in the Discord server that has been launched. We've had a ton of people join since I've been shouting it out in these videos. It's a great place to talk about basketball, NBA trade machine stuff. There's a ton of different tabs in there that you guys can just kind of interact with each other, even outside of the videos and outside of the streams. But with that said, let's go and get started. Okay, so if we're talking about why exactly this draft is a really strange one, there's a couple of things to go over here. The first is obviously the fact that we're holding an NBA draft in November. Typically, this is an event that's held in June, and then we kind of go through Summer League and things like that. And that's the first thing that makes this draft not only interesting, but just straight up strange. Now, there's a couple aspects to this. One, these players are, to my knowledge, not going to get the typical Summer League and maybe not even preseason type thing that they would normally get at the NBA level to get them a little bit more acclimated and things like that. As of now, it seems like NBA training camps are going to be starting in the beginning of December, which is basically a month away, which is kind of wild. But there's a flip side to that as well, where you could make the argument that because the schedule is so much different, these players have had so much more time to prepare for the draft, that maybe these rookies will be more impactful than they've been in years past, simply because maybe they don't have summer league, right? Maybe they don't have preseason, but in terms of their individual skills, in terms of their strength, in terms of their physicality, they've had more time to work on that than any draft class ever, really. And that might result in more polished rookies to start the season off. Now, we obviously don't know what all of their training schedules are like, and things have been weird in the world, so maybe this isn't true. Maybe they haven't had time. Maybe it's actually less time per day. But in terms of the amount of time they've had to prepare, these guys could come in and be more instant impact than we've seen in the past. And the other thing to keep in mind here is that this is going to be a really, really strange schedule as well for these NBA teams. I mean, we're talking about from December to before the Olympics, fitting in 72 games, a play-in tournament, and the playoffs. Teams are probably going to be relying on their younger players and, of course, rookies more than they have in the past because of what is probably going to be a condensed schedule. So again, an opportunity for a bigger impact from this draft class than maybe you would expect in a typical year, and especially given what seems like a relatively weak class, there could be a lot of opportunities here for players to not only put up numbers, but have a pretty big impact on their teams, especially in the regular season. Now, the other part of this, before we get into the specific players in the draft and things like that, is that I think this is one of the more movement-based drafts that we've had in a little while. What I mean by that is I feel like there's a lot of picks that could be traded in this draft, whether that be because a team thinks that they're one veteran away from being true contenders, or there are teams like the Celtics with multiple picks. We talked about this in yesterday's second upload as well, talking about teams that could be moving up or down the draft. When's the last time that the number 1 pick with Minnesota could potentially be in play via trade, which has been rumored? And then you've got the number 2 pick by the Warriors, which has been rumored to be on the move for a while now. I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but they could either move back to select a player that they like it to, but they don't think that they need to necessarily select it to. Or, of course, that pick could be moved for a star. And then there's all those teams that I talked about in yesterday's video where there could be movement up and down this draft. And that creates not only an interesting aspect to this, but again, a strange one. To potentially have so many picks traded is certainly something to keep an eye on for this class. Now, as we get to the actual players in the draft itself, again, there's some strangeness happening here. The fact that LaMelo Ball could potentially be the first overall pick and is someone that I'm advocating to be the first overall pick in this draft is incredibly strange. And for some people that means that it's a weak class, but still, the fact that this is a guy that, had the high school experience that he had and then went overseas and then has done all these other things basketball wise and has now come back around to being arguably the best prospect in this entire class just adds to the strangeness and the weirdness factor here. And then we've got guys, we've got a ton of international guys in this class that could be interesting as well, including someone that could even go with the number 2 overall pick in Deni. And you've got James Wiseman, who could go second or third or somewhere in the top 5 and barely played college basketball in a very Mitchell Robinson-esque way. And we saw how undervalued Mitchell Robinson was in that draft and how good of a player he's now become for New York. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen for James Wiseman, but again, it just adds to the strange factor of having a guy that's potentially a top 3 pick that went to school but barely played. And then you have Anthony Edwards, who's a player that, for me, more than anything else, gives this draft a potential like 2013-ish vibe in terms of the class, because he reminds me, at least in terms of the positioning in which he's in the draft and things like that, a bit of Victor Oladipo in terms of a guy that isn't a super polished offensive player, but is a great athlete, can be a really good defender, and is kind of stuck in the middle of like, this guy could go number 1 or this guy could go number 4, or we don't really know where he's going to end up, which again makes me feel very 2013-ish with Victor Oladipo. No, I don't think there's going to be an Anthony Bennett type pick in this draft class, but still, there's so many interesting storylines with this draft that make me really, really excited to kind of see where it goes. Another thing that's been said about this class is that there could be a ton of depth in this as well, which kind of separates it a bit from that 2013 class, and that there's a lot of guys that could be picked in the top 15 or even later that, again, as I spoke to in the beginning, could be really impactful for their teams, and that depth, again, just adds another level of interest. And we also have no idea who the first overall pick is going to be. I'm assuming that it's going to be LaMelo Ball, but maybe there's a team that wants to trade up to number 1 to pick someone else because they don't want to be picked before they're going to make their selection. Maybe it is going to be LaMelo Ball. Maybe it is going to be Anthony Edwards. Maybe someone loves James Wiseman. I have literally no idea, and the draft is in, 2.5 weeks? Again, 2013 vibes for me, which is one of the strangest, if not the strangest drafts of the last 10 years, and that's the parallel that I continue to come back to for this class. Now, on top of all of this other stuff, right, we've got so much weirdness happening here. There's also the fact that the pre-draft evaluation process is completely different than it's ever been in terms of interviews, in terms of workouts. A lot of that stuff has been relatively limited, and I don't know if that's going to lead to teams being more right or more wrong. Maybe they overthink it and they put too much time and effort into it, and then they end up getting it wrong, and they'll end up getting it right this time, or they won't have as much information as they typically would, and then we'll see a lot of misses in this class potentially. I really have no idea, but I'm excited to find out. This draft, I didn't honestly think that I was going to be this excited for it, but the more that I've looked into it, the more I've realized there's a lot of interesting storylines, which is what I love more than anything else about a draft class. There's a lot of talented players as well. Like, what if a couple of years from now we're like, man, LaMelo Ball is like an all-star, an all-NBA caliber player. How odd would that be? That would be so bizarre. But that's a possibility with this draft class. And there's a possibility with Anthony Edwards. It's a possibility with Deni. It's a possibility with James Wiseman. And that top 4 or 5 really, I think, has become way more interesting than we ever thought that it would be. When you were looking at this draft, you're thinking, kind of yawn. It's okay. It's not that great of a class. It's actually really, really good from an interest standpoint. And then you've got all those depth players as well. We'll see how it plays out, but be prepared for some weirdness and some strangeness for the 2020 NBA draft. But yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. As I said in the beginning, man, the Twitch thing has been awesome. I thank you guys so much for showing support over there, whether it's subs, follows, viewership, whatever it is. It's super, super helpful to me, and it really does mean a lot. And the Discord server as well, continuing to build that out and continue to add new features every single day. But the amount of new people that we had yesterday was honestly a bit overwhelming, but I'm happy for it, man. I'm glad we've got people in there. I'm glad we've got people in there, having discussions about basketball, and we're going to continue to add to it and make that the best thing that we can. So I really do appreciate that. But yeah, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.